You're safe now? Single dad stepped in front of a bullet for the CEO's daughter? The first scream cut through the ballroom like glass shattering. For half a second, no one understood what they were hearing. Music still played. Crystal glasses still chimed. Cameras still flashed. Then someone shouted, "Gun." The word rippled through the room, ugly and electric. People turned. A man in a dark coat stood near the center aisle, his arm extended, his hand steady, the barrel of the gun pointed upward, directly at the stage. Directly at the little girl. 8-year-old Sophie Lane stood beside her mother beneath the chandelier light, wearing a white dress that brushed her ankles. She had been bored moments earlier, shifting her weight from foot to foot while her mother spoke about innovation and quarterly growth. Now she was frozen. The man screamed something about betrayal, about ruined lives, about justice. His voice cracked, wild and raw. Security reached for their weapons, but they were too far. Bodyguards moved, but the crowd surged, bodies colliding, panic swallowing order. Someone knocked over a table. Glass shattered. A woman fell and didn't get back up. Isabella Lane, the CEO of Lane Global, the youngest woman to ever lead a Fortune 100 company, felt her breath leave her lungs. She reached for her daughter. She was 2 steps too far away. The gunman's finger tightened. And that was when Michael Hale moved. He didn't shout. He didn't think. His toolbox hit the marble floor with a hollow clang as his body surged forward, muscle memory older than fear taking control. He cut through the chaos, not fast like a man running but precise like a man who had done this before. 20 feet. 3 seconds. Sophie never saw him coming. She only felt arms wrap around her, strong and sudden, pulling her down as a body rose in front of her like a wall. The gun fired. The sound was deafening. Michael's body jerked as the bullet tore into his chest. Blood bloomed across his cheap white maintenance shirt, spreading fast, dark and final. He fell to his knees, but he didn't let go. He curled himself over the child, arms wide, shielding her completely as his body hit the stage. For a moment there was no sound at all. Then Sophie screamed. Security tackled the gunman. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Isabella dropped to the floor, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't even touch her daughter. Michael's breath came out ragged. His vision blurred. Sophie's small hands clutched his vest. I'm scared, she sobbed. Michael forced a smile through the pain. He leaned down, his forehead resting gently against hers. You're safe now, he whispered. Then his eyes closed. Michael Hale woke up before the alarm. He always did. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft sound of rain against the window. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, grounding himself in the ordinary. This was his favorite part of the day, the moment before responsibility began. From the next room came a sleepy voice. Dad. I'm here, Michael called softly. He swung his legs off the bed and padded down the narrow hallway. Ella, 9 years old, sat up in her blankets, hair tangled, eyes still heavy with sleep. She smiled when she saw him. Bad dream? He asked. She nodded. You weren't there. Michael sat on the edge of her bed and brushed her hair back gently. I'm always here. She studied his face like she was checking for cracks. Then she leaned forward and hugged him tight. You're my superhero, she said like she did every morning. Michael smiled the same way he always did, small, careful. Just your dad, he replied. Ella pulled back. That's better. Michael laughed quietly. He didn't argue. After breakfast, he walked her to school, holding her hand as they crossed the street. Other parents rushed past in tailored coats, phones pressed to their ears. Michael wore the same worn jacket he'd had for years. Nobody noticed him. Ella squeezed his hand before running inside. Be careful today. I always am. She paused, then turned back. Dad. Yeah. What do you think courage is? Michael thought for a moment. Doing what needs to be done, even when no one's watching. She nodded like she understood something important. He watched her disappear into the building, then turned toward another long day of being invisible. Michael clocked in through the service entrance like he always did. His badge didn't open the glass doors at the front. It never had. The maintenance department was already buzzing. Someone shoved a clipboard into his hand. You're on gala duty tonight, his supervisor said. Stay out of sight. Fix what breaks. And don't talk to anyone important. Michael nodded. That was the job. Lane Global was preparing for its biggest event of the year. Investors from around the world. Media. Politicians. And upstairs, Isabella Lane was rehearsing her speech for the 5th time. Mommy, Sophie asked quietly from the corner of the office, can I have a friend over sometime? Isabella didn't look up from her tablet. "We'll see, sweetheart." Sophie nodded and went back to her game. She was used to that answer. That evening, Michael stood near the back wall of the ballroom, checking a flickering light. "Watch it." He turned and found Richard Torres, head of operations, glaring at him like he'd stepped in something unpleasant. "Stay out of the way," Torres snapped. "This event is for people who matter." A few guests nearby laughed. "Who lets the janitor wander around here?" a woman whispered loudly. Michael said nothing. He stepped back. Across the room, Ella watched. She had snuck in through the service entrance, wanting to see where her dad worked. She stood frozen as strangers laughed at him. Michael met her eyes. He smiled and gave her a small wink. "I'm okay." She wasn't. On stage, Isabella stepped forward, Sophie beside her. "Ladies and gentlemen," and then the scream, the gun, the chaos, and Michael ran. If this story already made you feel something, if you believe quiet strength matters more than status, subscribe and stay with us. Next part reveals who Michael Hale really was, and why the world never saw him coming. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a metallic echo that sounded too final. Inside, everything smelled like antiseptic and blood. Michael Hale lay strapped to the gurney, his chest rising in shallow, uneven movements beneath the oxygen mask. A paramedic pressed gauze hard against the wound, her gloves slick and red. "BP's dropping," she said sharply. 70/40. "Stay with me, sir," another voice said close to Michael's ear. "Hey, look at me. You hear me?" Michael didn't answer. Ella sat on the bench seat across from him, buckled in too tightly, her small hands clenched into fists on her lap. They were covered in her father's blood. She hadn't noticed yet. She was staring at his face. "Daddy?" Her voice shook. "Daddy, you said you were always here." The paramedic glanced back, her expression softening for half a second before snapping back into focus. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "your dad's fighting really hard right now." Ella leaned forward as far as the belt would allow. "He promised." Michael's fingers twitched. "Barely." Ella saw it. "He moved," she cried. "Daddy, I'm here. I'm right here." The paramedic leaned closer to Michael. "You hear that? Your girl's right here. You don't get to go anywhere." Michael's lips parted under the mask. A sound came out, more breath than voice. "Ella?" She sobbed, trying to unbuckle herself. "I'm here. I'm here. Don't close your eyes." The ambulance swerved, sirens screaming, red and blue lights bleeding through the windows like a warning the world couldn't ignore. The hospital was too bright. Too clean. The kind of clean that made pain feel out of place, like something that shouldn't exist there but always did. Michael disappeared through double doors marked emergency surgery. Ella was stopped at the line. No, please," she begged, trying to push past the nurse. "That's my dad. I need to be with him." The nurse knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "I promise you they're doing everything they can. You need to wait here." Ella's legs gave out. She sank into a plastic chair, staring at the doors like if she looked away, he'd vanish completely. Minutes passed. Then Isabella Lane arrived. She didn't look like the woman from the stage. Her hair was disheveled. Her makeup streaked. Sophie clung to her side, her white dress stained red where she'd held onto Michael. Isabella saw Ella. She hesitated. Then she walked over slowly and sat beside her. Neither spoke at first. Finally, Isabella broke the silence. "Your father?" Her voice cracked. She swallowed. "Your father saved my daughter's life." Ella didn't look at her. "That's what he does," Ella said flatly. Isabella closed her eyes. "I didn't even know his name," she whispered. Ella's jaw tightened. "Most people don't." Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is the man going to die?" Isabella froze. Before she could answer, Ella turned and looked directly at Sophie. "My dad doesn't quit," she said. "He promised." Down the hallway, a group of executives stood in an uneasy cluster. Richard Torres paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. "This is a nightmare," he muttered. "Absolute PR suicide." One of the younger board members shot him a look. "A man was shot protecting a child." "I know that," Torres snapped. "I'm talking about the optics. Someone got video. I've already seen clips online." Another executive pulled out his phone. "It's everywhere." The footage was shaky but unmistakable. Michael running. Michael shielding. Michael falling. Torres's face drained of color. "That's the janitor," he said quietly. "Maintenance worker," someone corrected. Torres laughed nervously. "Jesus. I told him to stay out of the way." The words hung in the air, sour and ugly. Hours later, a man in a military dress uniform entered the waiting room. Colonel James Peterson, retired. He stopped short when he saw Ella. Then he saw the name on the chart by the door. Michael Hale. No, he whispered. Isabella stood. You know him? Peterson's eyes didn't leave the surgery doors. I buried men because of him. Isabella frowned. Excuse me? Peterson turned slowly. Sergeant Michael Hale. Call sign Ghost Wolf. Ella looked up sharply. What did you call him? Peterson knelt in front of her, his voice unsteady. Your father was the man they sent in when there were no good options left. Isabella's breath caught. That's not possible. He's a maintenance worker. Peterson let out a humorless laugh. That's what he wanted to be. He straightened. He walked away after his wife died. Vanished. Refused promotions, medals, everything. Sophie whispered, Why? Peterson looked at Ella. Because of you. Ella's chest hurt in a new way. Inside the operating room, bullet missed the heart by centimeters, the surgeon said. He's lost a lot of blood. Can you save him? The nurse asked. The surgeon didn't answer right away. We're trying. Public reckoning begins by morning. The world knew his name. Janitor Shieldsio's daughter from gunfire. Mystery hero identified as former Special Forces legend. You're safe now. Words that shook a nation. The comments poured in. That man is what courage looks like. I walk past people like him every day. Shame on everyone who laughed. Someone dug up footage of Torres mocking him. The internet didn't forgive. Ella sat by Michael's bed, refusing to sleep. Machines beeped steadily. Too steadily. She leaned close to his ear. You can't leave me, she whispered. I don't know how to be brave without you. Tears fell onto his hand. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed even though no one was watching. You said courage is doing what's right, she whispered. So wake up. Please. The world is watching now. But the most important battle hasn't been decided yet. If you believe quiet men carry the heaviest weight, subscribe and stay with us. Next part will reveal the cost of survival, and the truth Michael never wanted anyone to know. Michael Hale didn't wake up all at once. Consciousness came in fragments. Sound before sight. Pain before thought. A rhythmic beeping. Air forced into his lungs. A pressure in his chest that felt like someone was sitting on him, unmoving, merciless. He tried to breathe deeper. Pain exploded. A low sound escaped his throat, half groan, half gasp. Immediately, a voice cut through the haze. Hey, don't move. Don't you dare move. Michael's eyelids fluttered. Light stabbed through. Easy, the nurse said, one hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle. You're safe. You're in the hospital. Safe. The word hit him like irony. His memory snapped back violently. The gun, the stage, the child's scream. Ella, he rasped, panic slicing through the pain. Where's my daughter? She's here, the nurse said quickly. She hasn't left. A chair scraped. Then a small weight pressed against his arm. Daddy. Her voice broke something open in him. Michael turned his head an inch. That was all he could manage. Ella's face hovered near his, eyes swollen, red-rimmed, exhausted. You scared me, she said, her voice trembling between anger and relief. You promised. I'm sorry, he whispered. I tried. I tried not to. She shook her head hard. You always do this. You always run toward the scary thing. A weak smile tugged at his mouth. That's kind of my job. No, she snapped. Your job is being my dad. Silence stretched between them, thick and fragile. You almost didn't come back, she whispered. Michael swallowed, pain flashing again. But I did. She pressed her forehead to his arm, careful of the tubes and wires. Don't ever do that again. He closed his eyes. I'll do my best. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't let go. Isabella Lane stood near the window, arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself together by force. Sophie sat on the floor near the bed, coloring quietly. Isabella watched Michael with an expression she'd never worn in a boardroom, uncertain, stripped of authority. When Michael finally noticed her, their eyes met. He stiffened instinctively as if preparing for judgment. She stepped forward slowly. I didn't want to intrude, she said. But I needed to see you awake. Michael nodded faintly. Looks like I failed at staying invisible. Isabella let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, and almost like a sob. You saved my child, she said quietly. You gave her life. Michael shifted slightly, grimacing. Anyone would have done the same. No, Isabella said firmly. They didn't. The words landed hard. Ella glanced up at Isabella, her eyes sharp. He always does the right thing. Isabella knelt down to Ella's level. Your father is extraordinary. Ella studied her. You didn't think so before. Isabella didn't flinch. You're right. The honesty startled everyone, including herself. Outside the hospital, the crowd had grown. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder along the sidewalk, some in uniform, some in worn jackets heavy with medals. They didn't chant. They didn't shout. They stood in silence. Inside, reporters filled the lobby. Is it true he was Ghost Wolf? Why was a decorated operative working maintenance? Will Lane Global take responsibility for how he was treated? Security struggled to hold the line. In a private conference room upstairs, Lane Global's board convened under emergency protocol. Richard Torres sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenched. This is spiraling, he said. We need to control the narrative. Isabella stood at the head of the table. You mocked him, she said calmly. Torres scoffed. I didn't know who he was. That's the point, Isabella replied. You didn't bother to find out who he was. A board member cleared his throat. Isabella, we understand emotions are high. She slammed her hand on the table. No, she said coldly. What's high is our arrogance. And it nearly cost a child her life. Torres stood. You can't pin this on me. Isabella met his gaze without blinking. I'm not pinning it. I'm naming it. Silence. You're terminated, she said. Effective immediately. Torres laughed once, sharply. You're making a mistake. No, Isabella said. I'm correcting one. Security appeared at the door. Torres's face flushed. You're choosing a janitor over 12 years of leadership? Isabella's voice dropped. I'm choosing character over cowardice. Torres said nothing else as he was escorted out. Later that evening, Colonel Peterson returned. Michael watched him approach the bed and sighed weakly. Figured this day might come, Michael muttered. Peterson smiled sadly. You always did hate the spotlight. Ella looked between them. Why does everyone keep calling my dad Ghost Wolf? Michael closed his eyes. That was a long time ago, he said. Before you. Peterson leaned against the wall. He was the best we had. Michael opened his eyes sharply. Don't? Ella frowned. Dad. Michael looked at her. Really looked. I used to do things, he said slowly, choosing each word, that hurt people. Bad people, but still people. I told myself it was for the greater good. Peterson interjected softly. You saved lives. Michael shook his head. I took them too. Ella's voice trembled. Does that make you bad? Michael swallowed. It made me tired. He reached for her hand. When your mom died, I realized something. I could be a hero to strangers, or I could be there for you. Peterson's voice cracked. We needed you. Michael met his eyes. She needed me more. Ella squeezed his hand tightly. Later, Sophie approached the bed alone. Are you scared? She asked. Michael considered the question. Not of dying. Of what then? He smiled faintly. Of not being there when my kid needs me. Sophie nodded solemnly. I was scared you'd disappear. Michael looked at her. You won't ever forget what happened. She shook her head. No, then promise me something, he said gently. Don't grow up thinking safety comes from walls and guards. It comes from people who care. Sophie whispered, like you? Like anyone willing to stand in front of someone else. That night, Michael lay awake staring at the ceiling. Fame pressed in on him like weight. He heard voices outside the room. Cameras clicking. Whispers. He'd wanted a quiet life. Now the world was knocking. Ella noticed his restlessness. You don't like this, she said. No, he admitted. I don't. Will you go back to fixing lights? He smiled softly. Maybe. She thought for a moment. I like when people know you're good. Michael reached for her hand. I don't need them to know. I need you to. She smiled. I always did. Michael Hale woke up to sunlight. Not the harsh white glare of hospital lights, but real sunlight, warm and soft, slipping through half-open blinds and landing gently across his chest. For a moment he didn't move. He listened. Machines still hummed, but quieter now. Further away. Like they'd stepped back, giving him room to breathe. He turned his head slowly. Ella was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her chin resting on her arms, her fingers still looped loosely through his. She'd grown used to sleeping there. Nurses had stopped trying to move her. Michael watched her chest rise and fall. Alive. Here. Something in his throat tightened. He shifted slightly, careful not to wake her, but the movement was enough. Her eyes flew open instantly. "You're awake," she said, breathless. "I was before," he replied hoarsely. "You just scared me into staying that way." She huffed out a half-laugh, half-sob and stood up too fast. "Don't joke," she said. "You don't get to joke about that." "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You're right." She climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, ignoring the nurse who immediately started toward them. "Let her," Michael said quietly. The nurse hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. Ella leaned in, resting her forehead against his shoulder, exactly the way she used to when she was little and didn't want him to leave for work. "You scared me worse than when Mom died," she whispered. The words hit him harder than the bullet ever had. Michael closed his eyes. "I know," he said. "And I hate myself for that." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "Why did you do it?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "Because," he said slowly, "if I had done nothing, I wouldn't have been able to come home to you." Her lips trembled. "You almost didn't come home anyway." He nodded. "But I did. And that means I still owe you every tomorrow I've got." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Next time, we decide together." He smiled faintly. "Deal." Later that morning, Colonel Peterson returned, this time without ceremony. No uniform. No medals. Just a tired old soldier in a worn jacket. "They're waiting downstairs," Peterson said. "Media. Politicians. Veterans. Everyone wants a moment." Michael exhaled slowly. "Tell them no." Peterson nodded. "I already did." Michael looked at him. "Thank you." Peterson hesitated. "The president still wants to award you the Civilian Medal of Valor." Michael closed his eyes. "I don't want my daughter growing up thinking courage needs applause." Peterson smiled sadly. "She won't. Not with you." Ella looked between them. "Can he still say thank you?" Michael opened one eye. "To who?" "To Dad," she said. "To you." Michael laughed softly. "I guess that's allowed." That afternoon, Isabella Lane came alone. No assistants. No security detail hovering in the doorway. Just a woman who had been forced to see clearly. She stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment before speaking. "I fired 3 executives," she said finally. Michael blinked. "That seems excessive." "They laughed," Isabella replied. "They laughed at you." Ella crossed her arms. "Good." Isabella met Ella's gaze. "You were right. I didn't see your father. I didn't see anyone unless they were useful." She swallowed. "I've built my entire life on control. On walls." Michael shifted slightly. "Walls keep people safe sometimes. They keep people alone," Isabella said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "This is a contract," she said. "Director of Security and Community Relations. With authority. Real authority. And a salary that reflects who you are." Michael didn't take it. "I don't want power," he said. Isabella nodded. "Then don't take it for the power. Take it so no one like you is ever invisible in my building again." Silence. Ella looked at her dad. "You could still come home every night." Michael smiled at her. "That's the only part that matters." He finally took the folder. "I'll think about it," he said. Isabella bowed her head slightly. "That's more than I deserve." In the corner of the room, Sophie sat on the floor with a stack of papers and colored pencils. Ella knelt beside her. "What are you drawing?" Ella asked. Sophie held it up. A picture of a man with wings, not flying, not glowing, just standing, arms wide, shielding 2 small stick figure girls. Written at the top in uneven letters, "You're safe now." Ella stared at it. "That's my dad," she said. Sophie nodded. "I know." They sat quietly for a moment. "Do you think he'll always be like that?" Sophie asked. "Brave?" Ella thought about it. "He's brave," she said. "But mostly he's kind." Sophie smiled. "I want my mom to learn that." Michael was discharged 2 weeks later. No press conference. No speech. Just a quiet exit through a side door. Outside, a line of veterans stood at attention, hats over their hearts. Michael stopped. He looked at them. Then he did something unexpected. He nodded once. That was all. They understood. At home, the apartment felt smaller than he remembered, but warmer. Ella dropped her backpack and immediately began redecorating the space beside the couch. "This is where you'll sit when you're tired," she said. "I'll bring you water." Michael laughed. "I'm not dying." She gave him a look. "You're not allowed to die." Fair. That night they ate takeout on the couch. Just like always. Normal. Sacred. A week later, Michael signed the contract. He showed up to Lane Global in the same worn jacket. People stood when he entered rooms now. He didn't like it, so he made a rule. Everyone was to be greeted by name. Maintenance, security, assistants. No exceptions. Isabella backed him fully. This building doesn't run on power, she said in a company-wide address. It runs on people. Richard Torres' name was never spoken again. Months later, Michael sat on a park bench. Ella and Sophie ran across the grass, laughing, breathless, alive. Isabella sat beside him, quiet. I used to think loving again meant replacing something, she said softly. I was wrong. Michael watched the girls. Love doesn't erase, he said. It adds. Isabella nodded, eyes wet. Thank you for teaching me that. Michael smiled faintly. I didn't. The kids did. Ella waved at him. Dad. Watch this. He stood slowly, chest aching just enough to remind him. I'm watching, he called back. And he was. Always. Because heroism didn't live in the moment he took a bullet. It lived here. In benches. In backpacks by the door. In hands held at crosswalks. In showing up, again and again when no one was watching. Real heroes don't chase glory. They make sure someone gets home safe, and then they go home too. If this story made you feel safe, respected, quietly full, subscribe for more stories about invisible strength and earned hope. Your support means a world to us. Thank you for staying until the end.